Selamat siang Bapak Ibu sekalian. Izinkan kami untuk membacakan beberapa panduan singkat di dalam Zoom ini dan fitur-fitur yang tersedia di dalam Zoom hari ini. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me from the organizer to read several user guide of Zoom and how to activate several features in Zoom today. Berikut adalah panduan dan pengaturan dalam Zoom saat ini. Mohon pada saat masuk webinar klik join audio dan panelis untuk memute mikrofon bila sedang tidak berbicara dan selalu menyalakan video selama webinar berjalan. Mohon mengakses Zoom dari koneksi internet yang stabil. Mohon bila mengakses Zoom meeting ini dari koneksi internet yang stabil, mohon bila berdekatan dengan laptop atau gawai lain untuk dapat menggunakan headset, karena bila tidak dapat menyebabkan gaung atau feedback. Pastikan telah mengunduh atau menggunakan aplikasi Zoom terkini agar fitur interpretation tersedia di aplikasi Zoom Bapak Ibu sekalian. House rules during the Zoom webinar. When entering the Zoom meeting, please click join audio. For panelists to mute the microphone when you are not speaking, and please turn on your video for the whole duration of the webinar for the panelists. Please access Zoom from stable internet network. Avoid accessing Zoom nearby other users without using headset because it may cause echo or feedback noise. In order for the interpretation feature to be available in your devices, please make sure that you are using the updated Zoom application. Berikut bagaimana mengaktifkan fitur penerjemahan bila Bapak Ibu mengakses menggunakan komputer atau laptop. Di pojok kanan bawah akan terlihat icon bola dunia yang bertuliskan interpretation. Silakan klik dan pilih bahasa yang Bapak Ibu ingin dengarkan. Tidak perlu mute original audio, dan bila ingin berbicara silakan menyalakan mikrofon tanpa harus mematikan fitur penerjemahan yang bagi para panelis. So ladies and gentlemen, if you are accessing this Zoom using a laptop or PC, we have provided simultaneous interpretation feature. So if you go to the bottom right of your screen, you will find a globe icon. Please click once and you will find different languages available there. Select your preferred language, no need to mute original audio. Dan slide berikutnya. Fitur penerjemahan juga bisa diakses bila Bapak Ibu menggunakan telepon seluler. Di pojok kanan bawah akan ada 3 titik. Silakan klik dan pilih language interpretation, kemudian pilih bahasa yang Bapak Ibu ingin dengarkan. Tidak perlu mute original audio, dan klik done untuk mengaktifasi. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are accessing this Zoom webinar using a mobile phone, the simultaneous interpretation feature also available there. If you go to the bottom right of your screen, you will find 3 dots. Click once and then you will find language interpretation. Click one more time and select your preferred language. No need to mute original audio, and click done to activate the interpretation feature. Slide berikutnya. Dan pada akhirnya, guna memastikan kelancaran pertemuan hari ini, kami akan melakukan mute audio atau stop video para panelis yang tidak sedang berbicara pada saat tanpa sengaja menyebabkan gangguan terhadap acara. Ini dilakukan untuk menjamin suara pembicara dan juru bahasa tetap jelas. Please note that to ensure the smooth running of today's meeting, the host or co-host reserve the right to force mute the audio or turn off the videos of panelists who are not speaking that may be unintentionally causing disruption to the meeting. This is to ensure that the audio of the speaker and interpreter remains clear at all times. We thank you for your cooperation in this matter and have a productive webinar. Terima kasih Bapak Ibu sekalian, dan selamat berwebinar.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang, selamat pagi, dan selamat sore dimanapun Anda berada. Para Bapak, Ibu, dan pemirsa, terima kasih telah hadir dan berpartisipasi pada kegiatan kita siang hari ini. Baik yang telah bergabung melalui aplikasi Zoom dan juga disiarkan langsung melalui kanal YouTube Kementerian PPN Bappenas. Perkenalkan, nama saya Ganda Baskara Saputra yang akan memandu kegiatan kita pada siang hari ini. Indonesia merupakan salah satu negara yang secara aktif menggunakan batu bara untuk menggerakkan aktivitas ekonomi dan penyediaan listrik nasional. Namun pemanfaatan batu bara yang juga dinilai sebagai salah satu penyebab utama peningkatan gas rumah kaca yang menimbulkan fenomena perubahan iklim. pemerintah Indonesia perlu merespon secara bijak pemanfaatan batubara di Indonesia agar sejalan dengan proses transisi energi. Untuk itu dalam upaya mendukung hal tersebut, Kementerian PPN Bappenas bersama dengan GIZ, IESR, dan Agora Renewable melalui program Clean, Affordable, and Secure Energy for Southeast Asia atau Project ACE bagaimana coal phase out dilakukan di negara industri seperti Jerman untuk mengetahui tantangan serta manfaat yang didapatkan dari proses coal phase out. Dan kemudian juga akan dilanjutkan pada sesi kedua nanti dengan topik penerapan praktis dalam pengembangan perekonomian regional di negara Australia yang akan kita coba pelajari dari perwakilan otoritas Latrobe Valley sebagai salah satu contoh yang berhasil mendukung para pekerja di sektor batu bara dalam masa transformasi. Untuk itu telah hadir pula bersama kita dalam jaringan perwakilan dari negara Indonesia, Jerman, dan Australia, para ahli, selaku narasumber untuk memaparkan pengalaman mereka. Bapak Ibu yang kami hormati, pada hari Jumat nanti 29 Oktober, ikuti lagi rangkaian kegiatan ini yang akan dilanjutkan dengan dialog umum dengan topik peran batu bara dalam menjawab tantangan transisi energi di Indonesia. Untuk melakukan pendaftaran pada kegiatan siang hari ini, rekan kami telah menyematkan tautan yang telah di-share atau dibagikan dalam kolom komentar atau kolom chat. Bapak Ibu yang kami hormati, sebagai pembuka dari rangkaian kegiatan kita pada hari ini, mari sejenak kita dengarkan kata sambutan yang akan disampaikan oleh perwakilan dari Kementerian Bappenas dan Case Project Indonesia. Yang pertama, dengan hormat kami undang dan mohon berkenan Dr. Insinyur Rahmat Mardiana MA, Direktur Ketenagalistrikan, Telekomunikasi dan Informatika Kementerian Bappenas, untuk memberikan kata sambutan. Kepada Bapak Rahmat, kami silakan.
Baik, terima kasih Pak Mas Ganda atas kesempatan yang telah diberikan. Bapak dan Ibu sekalian, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, dan mudah-mudahan kita semuanya dalam kondisi sehat pada siang hari ini. Dan kami juga mengucapkan terima kasih atas kehadiran dari para narasumber, kemudian juga para pembahas dan juga para peserta dalam kegiatan ini. Dan kami mengucapkan terima kasih juga kepada GIZ, kemudian juga ISSR dan Agoda yang telah menjadi partner kami di dalam melaksanakan daripada kegiatan case di sini, dan diharapkan nantinya bisa memberikan kontribusi Bapak dan Ibu ya, khususnya terkait dengan rencana-rencana pembangunan yang akan dilaksanakan, baik itu jangka pendek atau tahunan, jangka menengah 5 tahunan, ataupun jangka panjang untuk 25 tahun ke depan. Dan memang dari sisi kegiatan ini momentumnya sangat tepat sekali dilaksanakan antara kurun waktu 2021 sampai 2024, mengingat dari sisi penyusunan dokumen perencanaan, khususnya untuk yang jangka panjang juga berikutnya itu akan mulai dilaksanakan mulai tahun depan, dan Bapak dan Ibu ya. Dan dari sisi proses juga sudah dilaksanakan beberapa persiapan, termasuk juga untuk menyiapkan terkait dengan visi 2045. Nah, ini mungkin yang menjadi titik tolak utama dari pembahasan kita pada siang hari ini. Tentunya ini juga tidak terlepas dari upaya untuk bisa memenuhi komitmen Indonesia di dalam kesepakatan ataupun hal-hal yang telah disepakati di dalam Paris Agreement, di mana pada saat itu ataupun di tahun 2016 Indonesia memiliki komitmen untuk bisa menurunkan gas rumah kaca sebesar 29% dari business as usual di tahun 2030 dengan kemampuan sendiri dan 41% dengan bantuan dunia internasional. Nah, kemudian ada beberapa target utamanya yang terkait dengan RUN yang memuat target bauran energi khususnya di pembangkitan, Bapak dan Ibu ya, sekitar 33% di tahun 2025 dan untuk yang di RPJMN 2020-2024 target bauran energi sekitar 20%, Bapak dan Ibu ya. Dan apabila melihat dari sisi perkembangan sampai dengan saat ini, kalau misalnya kita melihat dari total kapasitas pembangkit yang hampir 73.000 megawatt, komposisi dari bauran energi mungkin sekitar 14%-nya itu berasal dari energi terbarukan, Bapak dan Ibu ya. Dan kalau melihat tadi dari sisi target baik itu RPJMN dan RUN di 2020 dan 2024 masing-masing, tentunya juga bagaimana upaya mencapai target tadi juga itu memerlukan upaya yang lebih serius, Bapak dan Ibu ya. Dan memang kalau misalnya melihat dari sisi komposisi untuk yang PLTU Batu Bara sendiri di sini hampir 50% atau 48%, Bapak dan Ibu ya, untuk yang PLTU. Dan ke depan dengan adanya upaya mencapai daripada target Paris Agreement, komitmen Paris Agreement, dan tentunya juga beberapa negara lain ini juga telah menyampaikan beberapa ataupun target-target seperti Inggris mungkin di tahun 2030 menargetkan penurunan gas rumah kacanya sebesar 57%, kemudian juga Prancis konsumsi untuk yang bahan bakar fosil juga turun 40% pada 2030, dan keduanya menetapkan zero emission pada tahun 2050. Dan beberapa negara seperti Norwegia, Swedia, Spanyol, New Zealand menargetkan untuk yang target zero emission masing-masing di 2030, 2045, 2050, dan 2050, serta China sendiri menargetkan untuk yang karbon netral di tahun 2060, Bapak dan Ibu ya. Dan bagaimana dengan posisi Indonesia sendiri, Bapak dan Ibu ya, ini juga masih belum ada kesepakatan yang pasti tahun berapa, namun dari beberapa opsi ataupun pilihan tenggat waktu ada beberapa opsi yang dilakukan analisis, Bapak dan Ibu ya. Dan pilihan ataupun tentatif pilihan ada di tahun 2060. Dan dengan adanya upaya-upaya yang mengharuskan agar penurunan ataupun peningkatan daripada suhu bumi yang semakin agresif targetnya, tentunya juga target dari sisi tahun 2060 juga ini memerlukan beberapa percepatan, Bapak dan Ibu ya. Dan tentunya percepatan ini akan berimplikasi baik itu dari sisi sosial, kemudian juga dari sisi ekonomi, dan dari sisi lingkungan, sehingga pemilihan strategi bagaimana kita melakukan proses transisi energi dari energi fosil ke energi terbarukan itu juga menjadi suatu hal yang perlu kita pikirkan secara bersama-sama, Bapak dan Ibu ya, bagaimana memilih ataupun menentukan strategi yang tepat di dalam melakukan transisi energi, utamanya yang mungkin akan kita bahas pada siang hari ini adalah terkait dengan penggunaan batu bara di masa yang akan datang. Dan kalau melihat dari sisi kebutuhan pembiayaan dan investasi di dalam energi terbarukan, memang untuk saat ini pilihan teknologi yang ada itu masih dinilai lebih tinggi, Bapak dan Ibu ya, lebih mahal apabila dibandingkan dengan pembiayaan dan investasi di batu bara dalam memberikan listrik yang reliable dan juga dari sisi harga yang murah, Bapak dan Ibu ya. Dan berdasarkan studi yang dilakukan bersama dengan CASH juga, di sini ada beberapa usulan untuk pengurangan risiko, khususnya di pembiayaan dan investasi di energi terbarukan, Bapak dan Ibu ya, yang apabila dipilah ada dari dua sisi, yaitu dari sisi pengurangan risiko, dari sisi kebijakan. Di sini terkait dengan bagaimana upaya meningkatkan kejelasan daripada target energi terbarukan, kemudian juga reformasi terkait dengan harga dan subsidi, kemudian juga terkait dengan proses daripada perizinan serta juga proses pengadaan yang lebih terstandarisasi sehingga bisa dilaksanakan dengan lebih baik. Kemudian juga dari sisi peningkatan untuk manajemen risiko, Bapak dan Ibu ya, serta juga meningkatkan bagaimana penyiapan daripada proyek dengan meningkatkan dari sisi agar upaya meningkatkan kelayakan dan kredibilitas daripada proyek, Bapak dan Ibu ya. Kemudian juga dari sisi keuangan, Bapak dan Ibu ya, ini juga diperlukan beberapa pembiayaan inovatif yang bisa berasal dari jaminan, kemudian juga bagaimana cara pembayaran menggunakan performance based lending dan lain-lain. Di sini mungkin ada 10 jenis instrumen yang dari sisi keuangan yang memungkinkan untuk bisa digunakan dalam mengurangi risiko pembiayaan dan investasi di energi terbarukan. Dan kegiatan ini sampai dengan tahun 2024 ini melalui CASE juga akan sangat membantu Bapak dan Ibu ya di dalam penyusunan rencana pembangunan ataupun dokumen rencana pembangunan untuk yang jangka panjang 2025-2045. Kemudian juga terkait dengan hal itu RPJMN 2025-2029 dan tentunya juga untuk beberapa tahun ke depan di dalam pelaksanaan RPJMN 2020-2024 ini juga masih menyisakan ada penyusunan RKP 2023 dan 2024 dan tentunya kegiatan-kegiatan CASE ini akan memberikan manfaat bagi kita semua, para pemangku kepentingan, di mana dari sisi implementasi secara garis besar mungkin ada 5 kegiatan utama daripada case terkait dengan research, kemudian juga transparency and mapping, kemudian juga dialog and action, kemudian technical assistance, serta promoting public disclosure ya. Mungkin dalam kesempatan berikutnya nanti juga secara lebih mendalam akan dijelaskan oleh Ibu Lisa. Kami mengucapkan terima kasih atas kehadiran Bapak dan Ibu sekalian pada siang hari ini, dan mudah-mudahan diskusi pada siang hari ini bisa memberikan manfaat berupa peningkatan kemampuan, sehingga juga bisa memberikan pola pikir dan nantinya juga secara bersama-sama bisa memilih strategi yang paling tepat untuk bisa melakukan transisi dari energi fosil ke energi terbarukan dalam waktu yang cukup manageable Bapak Ibu ya, dari sisi ekonomi, kemudian juga dari sisi sosial maupun dari sisi lingkungan. Mungkin itu yang bisa disampaikan sebagai pembuka. Akhirul kata, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih Bapak Rahmat atas paparan serta sambutannya dari Kementerian Bappenas. Selanjutnya, Bapak Ibu yang terhormat, mari kita dengarkan kata sambutan dari Program Manager Case GIZ Indonesia, Ibu Lisa Tinsert. Lisa, I'll hand it over the platform to you.
Thank you, Mas Ganda, for the kind introduction. I hope all of you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, first of all, thank you for Pak Rahmat for making your opening remarks. I think they were very insightful. I liked it. I think you packaged it very nicely into the current global environment we're in, the global commitments and national targets of Indonesia, how to respond to it. You already highlighted some of the major challenges, but also solutions, instruments. And what I like most, I think, is that you also highlighted the spirit of cooperation. You said we need to discuss and select together how to achieve these targets. And I think this is very much what the CASE program is about. So thank you for this, and a welcome to all other speakers and of course all participants. I'm very glad that so many of you found your way to us on this first day of a series of events where we discuss experiences from other countries on coal phase out. I myself am speaking of the CASE consortium. I'm from GIZ, but as mentioned before, CASE is implemented jointly with Bappenas as a political partner and ISR, the Institute of Essential Service Reform, here in Indonesia. And we're also very lucky that as part of the larger CASE consortium, we're also having here today Agora Energiewende, Energy Transition, who support us as part of the CASE consortium. And we also have New Climate Institute as another implementer. Overall, it's funded by the German Ministry for Environment, Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety for until 2024. So we will be around for a while, which is good news, I think. So just briefly picking up on what Pak Rahmat already mentioned, what is the purpose of this event? I think we see currently it's a super interesting year, not just globally, but in particular also for Indonesia. We're all aware that the COP26 will start very soon, end of this month, where global leaders come together to discuss on how to achieve the limitation of global warming to 1.5 degrees, increased ambitions, and of course, announce net zero emission targets. We just heard from Pak Rahmat where Indonesia is in this regard, and I think it's fantastic to see how intensive the discussions are here in Indonesia from various ministries. We see a lot of different scenarios and being developed, so I think it's really encouraging to see. On the other side, we, of course, Mas Ganda, you reminded us that the power sector is still highly reliable on fossil fuels, and of course that's why such an event like this today was initiated. We also know that the IUPTL was launched just recently, the new one, the new 10 years power system plan. And also from there, we learned that the last coal-fired power plants shall be connected to the grid by the end of this decade. And I think we've all also seen these scenarios and discussions within PLN on net zero emission timelines within the power sector. So this is also still being discussed, but I think it's very encouraging to see all of this. And all of this is, of course, very much in line with the CASE program, which overall in 4 target countries, besides Indonesia, this is Thailand, Philippines, and Vietnam. The aim is to support these countries in an energy transition. And as such, providing the approach is to provide evidence so that there's a fact-based decision-making towards a sustainable energy system. In practice, this means we do a lot of dialogues with various stakeholders, we do research, we repackage evidence, and we do capacity development events like the one today, with the aim to discuss with you and identify options on how to shift towards a carbon neutral energy system that's based on renewable energy. And as Per Rahmat already mentioned, this is very much about identifying Indonesia's options, so that are, of course, economically viable, but also environmentally friendly and socially acceptable. Affordability was mentioned. So for today, we're very happy. It's the start of a series of discussions under the major theme that will stay with us under CASE for the upcoming years. So the role of fossil fuels in the energy sector. We will kickstart this discussion with sharing experiences from other countries. So you see, for today, we have Australia and Germany in the menu. We also will follow up with another event where we include South Africa. And the idea is here to understand and learn a bit more about best practices, but also what maybe have been challenges and what are the different aspects of such a coal phase out. So we're talking about policy aspects, but also economic, financial aspects, institutional, technical, and so on. And of course, also looking at the implications of the coal sector. So what does it mean for the people now working today in the coal sector if coal is being phased out? So it is very much about inclusiveness, trying to bring in different perspectives from various stakeholders. This event should also help us then to define further what type of activities and support we can do together with Bappenas for the Indonesian energy transition in the future. So looking at the panelists, we're very happy to have secured some very highly resourceful people. So we have representative from government, on one side from Germany, Jan-Christoph Wellershoff, but also from the transmission system operator in Germany, Ms. Kerstin Maria Rippel. We have someone from Australia, Ms. Karen Kane, speaking on behalf of Latrobe Valley Authority. And we have also from our own CASE consortium, Philip Litz, making some introductions about the country profiles. Very thankful that all of you have dedicated your time for this event. So before I hand back to the moderator, Per Vandan or Per Maskanda, I'm wishing all of us that, that we have a fruitful discussion, that it's inspirational, and that you hopefully find it insightful what we discussed today. So thank you very much, and back to Maskanda. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Terima kasih Ibu Lisa atas sambutannya dan sedikit introduction mengenai project CASE di Indonesia. Sebelum kita akan masuk ke acara inti, saya ingin mengundang, I would like to invite all of the panelists and the moderator of today to have a photo session, the most important thing of the documentation of the day. So I would like to invite all of you to activate your webcam if you haven't any, and let's take a group picture screensaver together. All right, there you go. Lots of beautiful faces from all over the world. Our team from Bahasa Global will help to document this. Please give us a sign.
Yes, Mas Ganda, thank you. So we will take the picture in 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
Okay.
Alright. Terima kasih Bapak Ibu dan hadirin dan pemirsa. Kita langsung saja masuk kepada acara inti di sesi 1 atau sesi pertama pada siang hari ini dengan topik membahas mengenai coal phase out in industrialized country, challenges and benefits of Germany's coal phase out, yang akan dipandu secara langsung oleh Dr. Insinyur Widiawan Prawiratmaja selaku moderator kita pada hari ini. Kepada Bapak Wawan, kami silakan.
Terima kasih Pak Ganda Baskara. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I was a bit relieved when everybody smiled. Speaking about challenges, I don't know what language should I speak. So, but if you wouldn't mind, especially to our distinguished speakers coming from abroad and also with the Bu Lisa, I would probably need to speak in Bahasa. Terima kasih Pak Rahmat dan Ibu Lisa atas pengantarnya yang sudah disampaikan barusan. Kalau boleh saya mengusulkan kita santai sedikit karena topik ini kan cukup berat ya. I think it's a very heavy topic and Indonesia has skin in the game for sure. And I think I would probably would like to propose to all of you that with this particular issue that is coming up, especially as the things that Pak Rahmat and Ibu Lisa mentioned about the COP26, about next week's happening, so on, and Indonesia's commitment, it is actually very a good momentum for us to discuss it. Baik Ibu Bapak sekalian, kita punya topik yang luar biasa menantang, yaitu tentang bagaimana peran batu bara dalam konteks energi transisi Indonesia. Dan kita sudah mempunyai beberapa pembicara. I would very much like to welcome our distinguished speakers and panelists for today's sessions. We have Pak Philip Litz, representing the Agora Energiewende. Am I speaking it correctly? And then it will be followed by Mr. Jan Christoph Wellershoff. Am I pronouncing it correctly? Jan Christoph, is it okay? And it will be followed by Ms. Kirsten Ripple. Ms. Kirsten Ripple, earlier Ibu Lisa sudah menyampaikan siapa mereka, dan kita akan mulai saja diskusinya. If you wouldn't mind to start, Philip, our virtual stage is yours. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon and good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for the possibility to give you a quick introduction here. It will be my job in the next 10 minutes to give you kind of an introduction and an overview on the 3 countries that we will be talking about today, which will be Indonesia, which will be Germany, and which will be Australia. Why does it make sense to actually compare these 3 countries? It makes sense because energy transitions are like snowflakes. What I mean by that is that there's no one like the other, but they all follow similar patterns. There are a lot of difference in different countries. Also, so there are differences regarding the energy transition, which means there are specific political and cultural contexts. All the countries have different financial and energy resources, but there are also a lot of commonalities because the questions that are asked towards policymakers, towards utilities, towards transmission grid operators are very much the same in all the countries. So I think it makes a lot of sense if we every now and then take some time and compare the different cases to one another. And despite there are many differences, we will see that there are also a lot of commonalities. For instance, the questions, how do we finance this transition? How do we ensure security of supply? And how do we increase socioeconomic benefits? Are questions that all the stakeholders are asking and all the policymakers need to give an answer to. So despite the differences in the three countries that we're talking about today, I think it makes a lot of sense to take a closer look on where there are actual commonalities and where there are lessons learned that countries can learn from each other. As we only have limited time, the introduction to those three countries will only be limited to a few core categories. So you get a rough overview, have a short impression on what the countries look like, and what the cases look like that we are talking about. We're first going to take a look at the climate targets. We're going to take a look on the role of coal in the power sector today. And we will take a look on the role of mining for the economic conditions within the country. Starting off with Indonesia, I guess it's probably the case that you're most familiar with. And since we had already a brief introduction, I'm going to go through that quite quickly. We've already heard that Indonesia is currently, or the government has currently set the goal to reach net zero by around 2060. And at the same time, the new PLN published its annual business plan, where it says that there should be no new coal additionally to the plants that are already in construction and are already committed to. So that means that over the next couple of years, also in Indonesia, we will see a discussion that's going to get started around phase down of coal in the power sector. The second point, if we take a look at the power sector today on the right chart, you can see that the share of coal has been steadily decreasing over the last 10 years and has reached today over 60% in the power sector, which also shows the significance and the challenges that go along with the upcoming transformation in the power sector. And third, we need to acknowledge that since Indonesia is among the top 3 coal exporters in the world, coal mining and the economic benefits that go along that regarding employment, especially in the coal mining regions, are very significant. In 2019, there were about 100,000 people directly employed in the coal mining sector in Indonesia. Switching to Germany, the German government aims to reach climate neutrality by 2045 and has 2 years ago implemented a coal phase-out law that mandates to phase out coal power by 2038, the latest. If we take a look at the net zero report of the International Energy Agency, we can see that this 2038 date is coming slightly too late. For industrialized countries, we would have needed, or we would see rather, more ambitious phase out needed until 2030 to meet the Paris Agreement obligations. What role does coal play in the power sector today? Coal has already dropped between 2000 and 2020 from roughly half of the production to only 24%. So that means that there's already a transformation going on in the German power sector, which has been significantly shaped by the increase of renewable energy. Renewable energy had increased their share from only around 10% or only around 4 or 5% in the year 2000 to almost half in the year 2020. Now it's basically what we see now, the biggest challenges, and now how Germany will be able to phase out coal within the next decade. What role does the mining sector play for coal, for Germany as a whole? What you can see on the right-hand side is that the employment in the coal sector had been decreasing steadily over the last 20 years already. Germany has already phased out its hard coal mining sector completely and closed its last mine 2 years ago. But it's still it's still more significant in lignite mining regions, where coal still is an important, or still plays an important part for the regional economic. Nonetheless, as part of the phase-out plan, until 2038, the latest, also these sectors are planned to be phased out. More details on how this phase-out plan actually looks like and what this means with regards to security of supply and how to operate a power system based on renewable energy. We're going to hear more details about that from my colleagues in a second. In the last case, Australia. Australia has so far not yet committed itself to a carbon or climate neutrality target. Its country's indices is to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 11 to 15% below 2005 level until 2030, which roughly means to get back to the state of the emissions level from the year 1990. There's also no specific phase-out date for coal yet in place. Nonetheless, there have been historically already been plants and mines closed, and there are several regions and communities that have already some extensive experience with regards to initiatives and how to support the transformation of these regions economically and to how to support workers in that regard. So I'm very happy to see our colleague from Australia, Karen Kane, to give us a few more lessons learned on that. How big is the challenge in Australia's power sector? Also in Australia, the share of coal has significantly decreased over the last 30 years. Nonetheless, the total amount of power generation from coal has been quite stable between 100 and 150 terawatt hours in the last 30 years. Nonetheless, the increase of power demand has been mainly covered by renewable energy and gas in the last couple of years. And last point, until I'm handing over again, the mining sector plays a big part in Australia's economy. Most of the coal produced is being produced for the export market, making Australia the biggest exporter of hard coal at a global scale. And with that, wishing us all fruitful discussion. Looking forward to your questions afterwards. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Phillips, for providing the background for our continuing discussions. We have two more speakers representing the case of Germany. One is from the government side, Jan Christ, and later on, Kirsten Maria Ripple will speak representing one of the private sector from the transmission, electricity transmission company. Jan Christoph is coming from the government. I'm not sure. Ibu Lisa earlier mentioned that Christoph is from the Ministry of Environment and Nuclear. I'm not sure about, because in my note there, you are actually representing the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy. Please also be informed that both Jan Christoph and Kirsten will speak each about 15 minutes. Over to you, Jan Christoph.
Yes, good morning or good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me.
Sounded okay. Very good.
Sound okay. Okay, then to clarify first, I'm indeed from the Ministry of Economics, which this is no problem, however, because we work very intensively together with our colleagues from the Ministry of Environment, especially with regard to the coal exit. Can you see the slides actually?
Yeah, very good.
But I'm not in the presentation mode, right?
Not yet.
There we go. So I'm head, first a brief introduction, I'm head of the Division 3B6, which is responsible for the entire coal exit in Germany. So over the last couple of years, I did basically nothing else than thinking about the coal exit in Germany. Let's quickly run through the topics that I would like to address. First of all, we should have a look into the decision-making process because it is quite interesting. Then we should have a brief look at the importance of coal in Germany and the implemented reduction path. And then finally, we should look at the measures that we have actually implemented to achieve the reduction. So the decision-making process is quite unique. It started actually with the coalition treaty in 2017 of CDU and SPD, where they quite unexpectedly, all of a sudden, set out that they wanted to introduce a coal commission that should deal with the coal exit issue in Germany. And after the government has been formed, this coal commission started to work. It worked actually from 2018 to 2019, some 8 or 9 months, I think. And what is quite unique about this, that the coal commission was a society-wide process. This is not a parliamentary process, but a society-wide process which aimed at including all stakeholders with regard to the coal exit in Germany. So this is something what we usually don't see with lawmaking in Germany. So this is something new where I will look into a bit deeper in a second. Then after the work of the coal commission, it followed what we usually see with legal acts that we implement in Germany, that is the government, and after that the parliamentary proceedings, which lasted from 2019 to 2020. And then already in 2020, which we consider to be quite a swift process, and already in 2020, we saw the first closures of coal-fired power plants in Germany. The process is mainly concluded. There is one pending issue, and this is the EU state aid clearing for the lignite compensation. But this does not mean that the reduction path or the measure, the entire measure, or something like this is at stake. It only considers the amount of compensation that we aim or that we plan to pay to the operators, and is not touching up on the agreed path. So this is very roughly running through the decision-making process. Now, I promise to have a bit closer look at the commission. How it's quite, we call it Coal Commission, but it has a quite technical name as well. This is the Commission on Growth, Structural Change and Employment, which is a political name. It drops it positiver maybe than coal exit. And here you can see the different stakeholders that played a role in this commission process. It were environmental organization, regional representatives, scientists, which I think was very important, as well as industry and business associations, which was also very important, labor unions, and at the sideline, however, representatives of parliament, the Länder, which is the regional authorities, and the federal ministries. As I mentioned before, the objective of this commission was to achieve a society-wide consensus. So the aim was not, because this was a major conflict in Germany about the coal exit, as we have seen it before with the nuclear, the aim was to really get all stakeholders on board, and therefore to let the stakeholders themselves take the key decisions of this coal exit. So as I mentioned before, we saw 9 months of intensive work of the commission. there were 24 members with voting rights, and which is, I think, quite remarkable. No acting politicians, that is, the parties were not members of the commission. The commission visited the affected regions, which sounds a bit not so important, but when I look back at the work of the commission, I must say the visits of the affected region was maybe one of the most important aspects of the entire work of the commission, because we faced a situation where the regions that were really affected had the idea that there is some commissions in Berlin, which is far away from us and who takes decisions that affect us. And they've never looked at, talked to us, have never been here. So those visits, they really changed this situation and were therefore for the entire process, I think, very, very important. Then we saw 10 plenary meetings, and the commission carried out a number of expert hearings on various topics, which was also, of course, very important because we had, for example, business leaders in the commission which were not as familiar with the entire energy sector and the energy-related questions as scientists or environmental organizations maybe were. So we really, the commission really had to bring up everybody at the same level, and that I think also they managed very well. So this was the work of the commission, and now let's have a brief look at it is framed as recommendations of the commission. So it's recommendations of the commission to the German government and the parliament with regard to the actual coal phase out. And I think the report with the recommendations is 200 pages or 250 pages long or something like this. I think you can put it aside, this report. What is important are those numbers here. And this is what the commission achieved. They achieved the key figures of the phase out, or they decided upon the key figures of the phase out path. So we started in 2018, roughly with 42 gigawatts, and they recommended to reduce the installed capacity of coal to 30 gigawatts in 2022, and then to 17 gigawatts in 2030, and then to 0 gigawatt in 2038. And at the same time, they recommended to review the end date of 2038 in the beginning of the 30s if it could not be brought forward to 2035. So this is where you have to ask yourself the question, is this numbers that politics could have decided upon as well as the commission? I think this is the main outcome of the commission's work. And I think it was very, very important for the entire coal exit process. Then there was a second pillar to the recommendations, which was politically also very important. The second pillar is the structural change and support for the structural change in the affected regions. Very briefly, the recommendations foreseen investments of around 40 billion euros until 2038 and even beyond in the affected regions, which is a very big number. Colleagues of mine worked on this issue separately, and they have spread out an investment plan in cooperations with the regions to really build up new structures in the regions. So this was, in a nutshell, the decision-making process. Let me then have a brief, or let us then have a brief view at the importance of coal in Germany and the reduction path again. So this is a map that I would like to show to you. And it shows one thing which is very important if you want to understand the German coal sector. You have to differentiate between hard coal on the one hand side and lignite on the other hand side. Because actually hard coal and lignite is two completely different stories. As you can see, the brown pillars, they are, first of all, they are big. And secondly, they are very much concentrated in specific regions of Germany. And what is important, especially in the eastern part, where you can here see 2.9 and 5.9 gigawatt, those regions are really in structural difficulties already today with the power plants operating. So especially in these regions of Eastern Germany, the fear was very, very big that if we close down the coal-fired plant, the lignite-fired power plants, that the structural difficulties that they have would increase. So this was the main focus of the entire part of what I called a structural support for regions. But what is more important to lignite, and we come back to it later, is with regard, lignite is a highly concentrated business. We have only two operators in lignite, which is RWE in the western part and LEAG in the eastern part. So it's a lot of market power and just two operators. And last thing that I would like to highlight with regard to lignite is you have, of course, a very tight link between the power plant and the open mine pit or the open mine. They are immediately interlinked because you can't transport. It's just not economically feasible. You can't transport the lignite over long distances. So this is, you cannot just look at the power plant with regard to lignite, but you have to look at the entire lignite system. So this is something that you really have to keep in mind. While when you look at the hard coal side, the situation is completely different. As you can see, you have plants all over Germany. You have no mine that is connected with this. All coal that we fire today is imported. As Philip pointed out, the last coal mine has been closed years ago. So it's all imported. And last but not least, you have a number of different operators. So it is dozens of operators, which sometimes operate only one or two plants, and you don't have this concentration that we see in the lignite sector. You'll see in a second why this is so important and why I pointed this out so explicitly. Then have a look again at the reduction path. You can here see again the cornerstones that the Commission has recommended. We have, and this was at all times throughout the entire political process, clear that we would have to meet those cornerstones that the Commission recommended. But again, the Commission made a recommendation, the Coal Exit Commission made a recommendation at very, very, very high level. So it were basically only the cornerstones and then some wording around that the reduction has to be steady and reasonable and so forth, and that lignite and hard coal have to be both reduced significantly at the same time. But it was very, very high level. So we had to transfer this into first of all, into a viable path, and then secondly, into a measure that you could really operate. So this is a very rough outline of the path that we aim at. You can see that we aim at ending the coal in 2038, and there is this option to pull it forward to 2035. And until then, we aim at reducing lignite and hard coal more or less at the same speed. Maybe one point, I forgot it. I come to think about it now. Lignite has one other thing that is completely different from hard coal. The CO2 intensity is much higher than with regard to hard coal. While politically, it was always very important that we would not, in the first place, phase out the entire hard coal and then come to lignite, but that we reduced them both steadily at the same time. So this is for the coal in Germany and the reduction path. Now we come to what is maybe the most interesting part, I don't know, the measures that we actually implemented to achieve these reductions. And there we come to this point, again, also with regard to the measures, we had to differentiate between hard coal on the one side and lignite on the other. It was just not possible for the reasons that I mentioned and the differences that we see to address both with the same measures. Now let's first jump into the hard coal side. What did we do? We have a legal act on the reduction of coal implemented, and with regard to the hard coal, we first of all implemented an auction process. That is, we see an auction regarding the capacities for decommissioning power plants. And in this auction process, we basically calculate the amount of reduction that we need for each year. And then we ask operators to place their bids with their power plants. So they have to offer us an entire power plant for the decommissioning. And then they have to tell us what is the price for this power plant, or for what price are they ready to decommission this power plant at the given time. This then, we do some calculations with regard to the CO2 intensity. CO2 is the average CO2 emissions of the last 3 years before the bid. And then the bids with the lowest price, we put them in an order, and then the bids with the lowest price per ton CO2 are accepted, or they receive an award, until we have filled up the amount of decommissioning that we need in order to meet our reduction target. This is, in a nutshell, there are different other aspects that we consider in the auctions. For example, the situation of the network. So power plants in the south, we have different problems transporting electricity from the north to the south. So power plants in the south are desperately needed, so they are a bit disadvantaged in this process. This is something to add. But what is most important with regard to this auction process, we carry out 3 or 4, I can't really tell you, 3 or 4 rounds of these auctions without a backup for to order power plants to shut down. And as of 2024, we see this backup that steps in if we do not see enough bids. And this is very, very important, because otherwise the prices for the bids would be much higher. But as we tell operators, listen guys, if we don't see enough bids from you in the auctions, as of 2024, we will shut down the power plants, the oldest power plants, by legal order without any compensation. They are, of course, motivated. They know who is first in this row, and they are, of course, motivated to place bids in the auctions. So that's why we see quite heavy competition in the auctions. And the first auctions that we carried out showed that there were much more offers than we needed, and the prices were far below the maximum price that we allowed in the auction. So this legal provisions backing up the auctions is very, very important in my view, if you want to have reasonable auction results in this mechanism. So this is the first pillar. But then I said we aim at phasing out until 2038. So we were not, and it was not reasonable to carry out auctions until 2038. We said we carry out auctions in the short term, because we as a lawmaker, we don't know which power plant is really ready and technically possible to be shut down. So we didn't want to make this choice, who comes first and who comes second in the short term. But on the other hand, we didn't want to pay in the long term for the entire shutdown of the power plants. That's why we see a second pillar, which you hopefully can see. And this is what we call the regulatory decommissioning. So as of 2027, power plants will be ordered to shut down according to their age. And there we simply start with the oldest first. So we put them in order by their date of starting operation. And the oldest one will then be shut down, again, to the extent that we need in order to meet our annual reduction target. And with regard to this, this putting them into order according to their age, we of course took into consideration retrofit into investments, because this changed. If you refurbish your power plant entirely, this is of course important, but in practice, this didn't play a very big role. So as of 2027, we see with regard to hard coal going power plants out by legal order without any compensation. So this is the hard coal side. Now I would have a brief look at the lignite side, and then we are almost through. With regard to lignite, you can see here a picture of an open mine pit, but I'm pretty sure that this is not Germany, though. I know the mines quite well in Germany, and I can't remember that could be here. I don't know where it is, but a colleague of mine put this in. It is a open mine pit. If it is a German lignite open mine pit, let's leave this open. So what was the situation with regard to lignite? As I pointed out, the specifics of lignite excluded auctions. We have only two major operators. You cannot really carry out with a good feeling auction when you have only two operators. And we have this special situation that we have to take the mine into consideration as well. That's why we carried out negotiations on the federal level with the operators on the reduction part and on the compensation that they would receive for this. The result of these very, very intensive negotiations was lasted for months and were really very, very exhausting. The result was a closure schedule which set forth that lignite would shut down more or the lignite power plants would be shut down more or less steadily, and a compensation which amounts to 4.3 billion euros in total for both operators and for everything, including the mines and so forth. This was decided on top political level, that is the chancellor and the relevant ministers made the final decision. And this is basically what we then translated into a legal act on the one hand side, and which is quite unique to this process as well, and into a contract between Germany and the operators. And this contract was very, very important to us for one reason, because in exchange for the quite high amount of compensation, we as Germany, as a country, wanted to be sure that these countries would not sue us under national law, or what is even more problematic, under international arbitration law. And that's why the operators had to declare a lawsuit waiver. And they did that, and that's why we are quite comfortable that what we have agreed there will be stable and will last. This is really important for everybody, for the operators, for the regions, for politics, and so forth. So this is lignite.
Would you mind to speed it up?
Yes, I already had the feeling that I'm a bit long. Excuse me, it's only, I think, 2 slides left. Let me briefly run through them and I speed it up.
Ahead. All right.
Poor translator, but well. Well, first of all, we have a ban on new built coal-fired power plants. This is obvious. We have checkpoints in a couple of years where we will review the entire measures and have a political process to see if it can carry on as it stands. We have an option, which is probably we will not consider, but we don't know, for government to compensate for rising electricity prices. And we have transition payments for all the employees to bridge the gap between the closure of the power plant and their retirement. So one last slide on the outlook, which is, what can I say? I can say, firstly, the train is on track for 2038. I wouldn't bet on 2038. I think it's the latest is going to be 2035. But the train and the entire measures is set on track for 2038. At the same time, things might accelerate considerably. First of all, the new coalition, which will probably, or most certainly, the Green Party will be part of this coalition, have pointed out in a paper that the coal might be ended ideally by 2030, whatever this means. At least there is a political will to again speed up things. And what is more, we have a European trading system on CO2 allowances, which will be aligned with European climate goals. And this again will be lead to a situation where CO2 allowances will be much more expensive, which will bring coal most certainly under pressure. So I wouldn't bet on 2038. It will be probably 2035. It's my best guess, maybe even a couple of years earlier. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Jan Christoph. I would hate to stop you there, but actually I really like the way you're presenting it. It's very clear, very systematic, and it was a good presentations, a lot of insights, and I think the translator also would agree with me that it would probably easier for them to translate it into Bahasa the way you speak it. So without further ado, Kirsten, of course, I probably need to be fair, so give you probably some same amount of time that we already allocated for Jan Christoph, but I would appreciate it also if you could actually put it within a time with the frame of 20-25 minutes, if it's okay with you. Please go ahead. Justin? We still cannot hear you.
Sorry, Kirsten is still muted.
Maybe you're still on mute, Kirsten? Kirsten, are you there?
Again, dear ladies and gentlemen.
All right, good. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Can you see my slides also? The next.
Very clear, very clear.
Very clear. So thanks, Wawam, and dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me today. My name, Wawam already introduced me, is Kerstin Maria Rippel, and I'm heading the Communications and Public Affairs unit at 50 Hertz, which is a transmission operator in Germany. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity today to talk to you about the things we are doing instead of using electricity stemming from coal-fired power plants, because I think we've heard a lot of things about the coal phase-out and how to organize the lignite and hard coal phase-out in Germany. And now I see it as an opportunity to talk about the successes we have already achieved in the deployment, the transport, which we are the experts for, and the usage of renewable energies in Germany. But also, I will talk about the clearly existing and hard challenges that a complete coal phase out is posing on us, on transmission system operators in Germany. In other words, I try to shed a bit of light on the overall pressing question. At the end of the day, it's will the light still stay on? And of course, I'm not a prophet or something, but I will show you what we at 50 Hertz are already doing to keep the lights on, because right now it's quite challenging, to be honest. What we will do on our path toward 100% renewable energy system, because that's the other side of the medal, and what challenges are still open to be solved from our point of view. And I remember the introductory words this morning. It was about which different perspectives you will see today. From my presentation, you will see some technical issues, some regulatory and legal issues, and some political and societal issues that I will try to shed light on. Thanks to Philip's and Jan Christoph's great introductions and presentations, you already have a picture of what is going on in Germany. Nevertheless, I allow myself to start with a quick overview on what is 50 Hertz is actually doing, and I'm now fuzzing around with the presentation. So you should actually see, first of all, a map of Germany, but you don't. Yeah, I like the technical stuff here. So you see, we are covering, as a transmission system operator, the eastern parts of Germany, including Berlin and the city-state of Hamburg. And we ensure the safe supply of electricity to about 18 million people and many industrial companies by guaranteeing a stable electrical system, of course. Another specialty that differs from Indonesia, we are a fully unbundled TSO that owns its assets. So we are more than an ISO. And we are, of course, responsible for a safe and reliable electrical system. Besides these major issues you see on the slide, we furthermore developed the energy system in Europe, and we are, that's another specialty, responsible for the management of the payment flows stemming from two legal acts, the Renewable Energy Law and the Combined Heat Power Act. And another specialty, because you don't see the slide, I don't know why actually, is that in Germany, there are 4 of us. We are 4 TSOs in Germany. We are only covering the eastern part of Germany. There are 3 others in the other parts of Germany. And so, and that's why a bit the question could arise, why are we invited from 50 Hertz and probably not some of the other 3 TSOs? It is because, and you can see it on this slide, because we are actually pioneers in the safe integration of renewable energies. We have already over 60% of our annual average consumption in our grid area covered by renewables coming, and you can see that here from only 25% 10 years ago. So as you can see on the next slide, the share of renewable energy in electricity consumption has risen to 62% last year. And last year, we've seen additional 1.8 gigawatts of renewable energy sources been installed, mainly from solar and wind onshore. But also offshore wind energy is increasingly important, as electricity, as we all know, can be produced there very continuously at sea. In our case, it's the Baltic Sea, but on a group level, on the holding level, also the North Sea. So we can truly say that our grid area, north and eastern Germany, is a kind of a green powerhouse of the German energy transition. So not only the lignite power plants are there, Jan Christoph, but also most of the installed renewable energy capacity. And as this picture shows you, it's not only today that this is the case, but also in future. And even though we have this huge amount and huge shares of renewable energies that has been constantly rising over the last years, our congestion management amounts and costs fell. And this proves, from my point of view, two things. I mean, first of all, that our people in system operations are doing a great job, obviously, but secondly, quite obviously, that the grid reinforcement and grid expansion are having a huge stabilizing and mitigating effect on a system with highly intermittent renewable energy sources. And a good example, you can see it on the right side on the slide, is our southwest coupling line, HDVC interconnector, that has saved us about, and I just checked it up this morning, 869 million euros in redispatch costs over the years, obviously, since 2016, when the line started being fully operational. We do actually, it's quite a nice feature. We do have a calculator on our website where you can see how many euros we saved, and it's actualized every day, I guess. At the same time, and this shows you the next slide, we have been able to ensuring system stability, system security around the clock, 24/7. I mean, Germany has, Jan-Christoph and Philip explained it already, we have already and traditionally a very high level of system security and stability per se, but I'm a bit proud to say that in our 50 Hertz grid area, as you can see on the left-hand side here, the disruption rate in our high voltage grid, which has this exceptionally high rates of renewable intermittent energy, is particularly low. And also the so-called SAIDI index, it's the level that indicates power interruption on the distribution system operators level, as consumers level, is very low in our area. And I think it's, yeah, kind of success. But let's have a look at the coal phase out. I mean, timetable and challenges. Timetable, Jan-Christoph already explained it very well. I go only through that very quickly. I mean, the thrilling question is, I guess we all ask ourselves, definitely in Germany, but probably also around the world and in Indonesia, what do we expect in the next years? And I think we can all say in Germany, in Indonesia, and around the world, people expect to have the lights still be on, and they don't care about our challenges or what do we have for whatever hours to work on. They just want to be, you know, they have the lights on, they want to have electricity. And actually in Germany, we have the nuclear phase out. From next year on, we don't have any nuclear power plant left, and the coal phase out at the same time. And this was and is a huge challenge, and it won't be any easier by two major actions, and Jan-Christoph already referred to it. First, and I don't think you mentioned that, Jan-Christoph, in response to Federal Constitutional Court's ruling on climate law earlier this year, the German government decided that we have to be carbon neutral by 2045. We have already learned that number, 2045, carbon neutrality. And the second, and Christoph told you, the coalition parties, which are currently negotiating, have already announced, and I understood they really announced it, to agree upon a coal phase out in the year of 2030. We will see if this will be end up in a legal act. We already have to wait for that, but I understood it quite clearly, but we will see. At the end of the day, this means that everything I'm telling you today must be tackled even more quickly. And another picture, I only drew a nicer picture than you, Jan-Christoph, you already told it about it. So we by the end of next year, around 11 gigawatts of coal capacity will have disappeared at the end of the day. And by 2030, another 13 gigawatts, by 38 at the latest. As we just said, we expect it to be quite earlier. No more hard coal or lignite-fired power plants will participate in the electricity market. No? We will see how many will be there as backup capacity or something else. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is for us at 50 Hertz a major challenge, because our region, Jan Christoph referred to it, is a region in Germany with high lignite-fired power plant capacity. The Lausitz region in Saxony and Brandenburg is kind of the headquarters of lignite-fired power generation. And the question is actually, what do we need to replace the coal-fired generation capacity? And well, I have already told you the most important thing is and will stay to compensate is the massive expansion of renewable energies on a large scale. And that's why our grid planning colleagues are currently counting on, they can only, they are not prophets either, so they have to use every data available to expect a wind capacity to expand from around 20 gigawatts today to more than 33 gigawatts, and solar capacity to expand from now 12 gigawatts to 36, tripling in our grid, only in our grid area by 2035. So we see we have to triple something, and we have to do it probably even faster. And with the new climate law and the new government in place, we expect these accelerations. According to our current grid development scenarios, we assume that the power plant fleet in Germany will develop over the next 15 years in the way you see it here on the slide. So while we experience the complete phase out of all nuclear and coal capacities, our grid planning experts, because to be honest, we do need something else besides renewable energy to cover for specific situations, backup capacities. So we see there is an increase in controllable, let's say, controllable dispatchable capacities to over 40 gigawatts from 27 gigawatts today. Nowadays, our grid planning colleagues think that to be gas-fired power plants, but in Germany, there's a huge discussion ongoing about hydrogen-ready power plants. And we think that might be the case, that we have then green hydrogen fired power plants, or actually something completely new and innovative. We don't know yet. But actually, the decisive point here is that only because we TSOs see something or predict something in our grid development plans, we are far from having installed capacity in reality. So the question is, who is actually building these substituting capacities in Germany? It's quite a huge question, and I think that's the most relevant in Germany at this time. For us, what did we do? Because we first think we have to act and not only to ask politics to do something. We came up with a new strategy. It's called From 60 to 100 by 2032. So this was before the 2030 pressure. We came up with this strategy last summer because we knew to meet all those challenges, we have to become more active as a TSO. I mean, we are a regulated monopolist. Normally, nobody asks us to do something like this or be specifically active, but we saw it as a prerogative. So we couldn't act in another way. We want to make a difference. We want to become more active. We want to cooperate more closely, and we have, all of us, politics, society, business, to become faster. And what do we want to achieve with this strategy? Well, we want the electricity consumption, obviously, in our grid area in 2032 to be covered by 100% renewables energy on an annual average. All of us know that 100% renewable energy is not possible 24/7, but on an annual average, it is possible. And with the strategic initiative, we want to set a climate and industrial sign. Jan Christoph already explained it. Our area, they've been afraid of the coal phase out a lot. And we wanted to support our region and to show that we do have actually a unique selling point here. We do have the unique selling point of green electricity here. And this unique selling point is attracting international industry. You might have heard that Tesla has actually decided to have a huge industrial site here in Brandenburg in the eastern parts of Germany. And what is specifically needed to reach the 100%? You can see it on this slide, where we have calculated how much renewable energy we need. The path to 100% is, of course, long and hard, and it will be even harder if we have to accelerate. But at the same time, and due to sector coupling, of course, we haven't talked about that. Sector coupling is a very important point, highly discussed in Germany. At the same time, we are convinced that we can reach that, cooperating on a larger scale, acting together, and accelerate everything we are doing. As of today, I must confess, progress is too slow. The next is a slide you can see here, shows that the expansion of wind energy is currently progressing only slowly. And I will tell you why, because first of all, sorry, I'm Christoph to tell you that, but because of regulatory obstacles, obviously, due to, it's a major point actually, due to area scarcity, we don't have enough legally provided area, I must say it like that, because one can change that. And because of acceptance issues, because let's be frank, nobody wants to have a wind turbine in front of a nice balcony. So we have to work on that, and I think the expansion of renewable energies with all these challenges is an overly important task for politics, for industry, and for society as a whole, because if we all want to have an energy transition, if we all want to have green energy, then we have to accept that there are some kind of downsides are coming with it, and we have to accept that. Maybe I give you an insight in what is important for us TSO, so the technical side, no? Because for us as a TSO, we have at the end of the day to avoid blackouts, to say it very frankly. That's our task, and it's not getting easier. And more technically spoken, we have to answer the question, who is providing for ancillary services that are stabilizing the system 24/7 once thermal power plants are gone? Even more technically, our responsibility as a TSO is to ensure voltage, frequency, and dynamic stability, as well as grid restoration. We have also to take care of an efficient congestion management. I already told you that we are, let's say, quite successful in it on this end. And we have to take care of adequacy-related issues, because at the end of the day, for adequacy, policy or the Ministry of Economics and Energy is responsible, but we have to deal with specific adequacy-related issues. So specifically, we have to find solution to the following challenges, and you can see it here on the slide. Grid load. This is getting problematic if the supply of electricity is too high, not too low, too high. The measure to mitigate is congestion management, redispatch, fossil-fired power plants, and curtailment of renewable energy sources. And here I have already shown you that we are improving. And it's kind of good news. This challenge is actually decreasing with the coal phase out, obviously, because then we have less capacity in the grid. Next challenge, voltage stabilization. It's another challenge. The point here is that higher grid load also requires more reactive power that so far is provided by the coal-fired power plants. So in the future, this must be substituted. And we are doing analysis here together with scientific scientists and universities And results of first analysis indicate a significant demand for voltage regulating assets. Next challenge is the dynamic stabilization. Then we have the grid restoration, and part of that is the black start capabilities. Where do they come from? And of course, I already told you adequacy. Adequacy is probably the most important question we have to discuss. And I'm not telling you what we are doing at 50 Hertz to deal with the problems. We have done, as I said, grid extension to ensure system security is there, and grid optimization and grid extension is not only decisive, but inevitable, I would say. So, and this shows you how far we've come. And yes, I know there is certainly some acceleration necessary. And the second very important investment we did in system security and stability, and actually that's important, and one that can be realized in the short term, are so-called reactive power compensation units, like STATCOM synchronous compensators. Here you can see it on a slide. And in the future, these grid stabilizing technologies will fulfill functions that are currently still performed by thermal power plants. So there is one idea of substitution here that helps us in stabilizing this system. We've already received here approval for 16 plants, and the first one is already under construction here. So on the next slide, or let's say a third point besides grid expansion and the installation of reactive power compensation units, let me refer to the importance of interconnectivity of the European high voltage grid, and of course, the European electricity market. Both are crucial prerequisites to be able to deal with the coal phase out in Germany. Without our European neighboring countries, we would not be able to do that. It's a very clear message I want to give you here. It's a meshed grid, it's a European market, and we have interconnectors to our European neighbors, lucky us. The fourth very important measure is flexibilization. Here, we at 50 Hertz, we as TSOs, I can speak for all of us, I think, are fully committed to make, but it's not up to us all the time, to make consumption more flexible. I was talking about sector coupling, so everything has to be more flexible so that we can use it in order to support the whole system. But you've seen we've done a lot of things, and there are some things that are helping us: flexibilization of the system, interconnectivity of the system, European markets. But there are, of course, open challenges. And I want to be quite frankly with you, what are these open questions that are actually, we are actually busy doing research and working on that, let's say day and night. It's really some pressing issues. The two major questions that we ask us before we are dealing with that is always, first of all, do we have enough intelligent and innovative technology to make this transition from coal to renewable safe? Because that's our task. And do we have, again, to you, Jan Christoph, do we have the fitting and enabling legal and regulatory framework in place? And the answer in the two cases, I'm sorry to say that, is no, we don't. So the regulatory framework in Germany is currently not yet set in the way that is required. So there is some task for the new government, and we still need solutions, technical solutions, innovative technical solutions to compensate for specific, urgently needed ancillary services. As to the challenge of dynamic and grid restoration, we need primary control and inertia to compensate unit outages. urgently needed. This requires coordination and agreements on a European level, of course, and further studies. We need all the scientists we get to find solutions here. And to be quite honest, the gas-fired power plants are not able to provide for sufficient inertia here. So that's not a solution. As to the challenge of grid restoration, we need the commissioning, and Jan Christoph already explained it, while we need the capacity in the south of Germany. We need a sufficient number of black start capable units, not only in the south, but also in the north, because, you know, blackout can occur everywhere. So we need some black start capable units. And we don't know where they will come from once coal-fired power plants are no more in the system. At the moment, we've foreseen gas-fired power plants in the grid development plan, but I already explained to you, nobody is currently building that gas-fired power plant. So we urgently need at least a legal discussion on how do we incentivize companies to build that grid-fired, these gas-fired power plants. But of course, no, as I said, gas-fired power plants nowadays foreseen in the grid development plan, but in the future, this could also be a hydrogen power plant for sure. And we do here some analysis ourselves together with scientists from the TU, the Technical University of Kaiserslautern in the southern part of Germany, and with the Fraunhofer Institute. Third challenge, line loading, even though, as you could see, we are performing not too bad on that point. We need capacity reserves in the south to cover the redispatch demand there. Why is this? Because even though I said this problem will decrease in future due to coal phase out, it still will occur every now and then, and we can't avoid it. It's just a physical thing that we have to deal with. And the fourth challenge, and I'm quite redundant about that, but I think that's important. It's regarding the adequacy challenge. Well, we need sufficiently dimensioned capacity in Germany for dark slack periods. We refer to it as the so-called Dunkelflaute. At peak times, we've seen that there will be an import requirement of about 20 gigawatts at the end of the 2020s in Germany to maintain system stability in certain situations that might be only some hours over a week or so, but they are inevitably necessary in order to avoid the blackout. So there has to be a decision been made. So if you ask me, might be a good idea to actually begin or start again, because we have that done in the past, the discussion on capacity mechanisms seriously in Germany. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm coming to the end, but I mean, I hope you've got a little picture of Germany and the challenges we have to face. I think we have to find solutions, and we have to find them together. We will find them together with science and industry, to come up with smart technological ideas, and with politicians and society to build up a suitable market design. And of course, we all have to deliver faster. And then only short, the last point, and then I'm over. I'm sorry, Rowan. Just a lesson learned. So how can we actually support Indonesia? I think that could be interesting for you. I have brought with me a colleague from our subsidiary from Elia Grid International that's actually doing business in Indonesia. EGI is a company that actually sums up competencies that we have in the 2 TSOs in the Elia group. And my colleague is also here in the meeting. So in the Q&A session, he might be able to answer you some additional questions. EGI is offering consultancy and engineering services to support international energy markets. And with this overview on the, let's say, consultant capacity of EGI and its track record, ladies and gentlemen, dear Wawan, I will call it a day saying thank you for your interest. Thank you for your patience. I'm sorry about prolonging text here. And I'm looking very much forward to the Q&A sessions later on. Thanks.
Thank you, Kirsten. 50 Hertz is actually a business entity after all, right? And I really like your candor in terms of putting forward to the regulator about how you're facing the challenge, because at the end of the day, you are the one who's facing the customers. I understand it very well. I'm supposed to put making a summary, which I probably wouldn't because the presentation was so clear. What I like to highlight actually is some numbers, some numbers to cover. Earlier, Jan-Christophe mentioned about 40 billion euro. Then I think Kirsten mentioned about 869 million euro and counting, I would presume, with the challenges that she's projecting us in terms of, I think she's been using this meeting also to speak indirectly to Jan-Christophe, for example, which I think it's an interesting on its own forum. And I think I'm going to go directly to the next speaker. But before doing that, I appreciate very much Jan-Christophe for providing the answer to the Q&A. Some people already addressed some questions, and I would appreciate it also if Kirsten will do the same. I would particularly like to notice that the questions posted has been very, very good questions. I also noted that a very, very high level of officials, especially coming from Bappenas, Ibu Budi Astuti has been keen. She is the director in Bappenas and responsibility for fiscal sustainability. So I understand the question, and thank you for Jan-Christophe to be providing the response. And Kirsten, feel free also to answer to the question that's already been addressed by Jan-Christophe. So if you think it's also something that you could address that is appropriately, feel free to also provide the response, Kirsten. So I think I would like to proceed, but before we do that, I would like to provide the cue for the organizer, if you would like to do something in between before we move on to Karen. Anything from the organizers to show something? Oh, I think they're already showing something. This is very nice. Okay, thank you. I'd like to call upon, is Karen here? Karen, are you here already?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much.
Hi, Karen. Welcome once again. And we are very honored to have you addressing the audience. We have high officials from the ministries, from Indonesia, from the government. And I think we've been very fortunate to hear the experience coming up from the Germany, coming from the government, and also for the business entity who's facing the changes. And I understand very much that this is not a very easy feat. I think it's costly. And in the case of Indonesia, there's something also related to the opportunity costs. Earlier, Philip Liz mentioned about Indonesia exporting a lot of coal. And I think it's also similar to the case of Australia. So it's not only transitioning of the coal phase down within the country, but losing the income coming from the coal export also been an issue. And in the case of the regions within Australia, there could be another things that needs to be addressed by the government. So Karen is coming from Victoria, and a very particular location in which the transition already been taken places. And over to you, Karen. Thank you so much for addressing this event.
Thank you very much, and good evening from Australia. And I'm very pleased to be here for this discussion. So I'm going to talk about, and I'm just waiting for some slides to come up, if that's okay. So thank you very much. So I'm the CEO of the Latrobe Valley Authority, and I'm here to talk to you about the practical on the ground transition action work that has occurred in the Latrobe Valley over the last 4.5 years. So Mark, go to the next slide, please. So just a bit of a picture for you where we are. State of Victoria, yes. And you can see within the state of Victoria, we are about 2 hours southeast of the city of Melbourne. Next slide, please. This is the map of the Latrobe Valley, and as you can see in the pink coloured areas are the 3 coal-fired mines. The one that I'm going to talk about today in terms of the transition work is associated with Hazelwood. You'll see that mine there. That closed in 2017, in March 2017, with only 4 months' notice. So the approach to transition was a very quick one. But as you can see, the communities there in grey, those 3 town locations are right on the doorsteps of those 3 coal mines. And these coal mines have served the state of Victoria for decades now in terms of electricity production, and also into other parts of the country. Next slide, please. So the authority was set up by the state government, by the Premier of the state, and our job was to do things differently to support workers and businesses, but also, really importantly, to work with our community on things that mattered to them at the time of the impact of the closure, but to build on collective effort, leadership and local strengths for long-term resilience. I'm a member of this community. I've come out of senior levels of state government, and so this is my community. I live here, and we have a team of people, mainly local, employed to work within our own community. So we've set up as an administrative authority. That's the way that we've been set up, and we might move to the next slide, please. So what was important about the establishment of the authority was that we wanted to come in and be quite creative about the way we worked, and we were given the mandate to do that. So we were resourced to do that. We selected our own team. We built our own strengths and skilled workforce in terms of our own staff. But alongside that was an investment of $266 million from the state government and $40 million from the federal government to look at an approach for the first years. Now, we're obviously well aware, and just listening to my German colleagues here, that transition takes a long time. So our work was to look at the first 5 to 10 years just in terms of community ownership and change and participation, and to think about what sorts of new practices that we needed to embed and what conditions we needed to put in place that would lead to the necessary private sector investment for the future growth sectors within our community. And what was really important about this approach was a proactive and a very positive approach to the future. So one of the things we didn't want it to be was a deficit or dependency model. So we cannot continue to think about governments providing the funding to continue to support communities in this situation. Yes, initially, very, very important, but the long-term plan is for communities like this, and we're one of many in Australia, to be able to have a sustainable and independent future. So really importantly, as we've learnt, is about capability building. So this is about how do you shift the institutions in a community that have been reliant on a resource sector for decades and decades and have had not to do anything very differently. This is about collective effort. So how do we make sure that industry, community groups, local and state government, researchers and training organisations all work together on the things that do matter and on the things that will make the difference. So it is absolutely about coordinated community leadership and collaboration. Very, very important work. And our job was to come in and not only support the immediate response, but also make sure that the conditions we needed to have in place are in place and continue to be built. Thank you. Next slide. So we've really examined the stages of transition and the work that we've been doing. And these are not linear. We come in and out of these stages depending on the progress we make. So the immediate response, and as I mentioned, 4 months notice, not long. We were stood up on the day of the announcement of the closure of the Hazelwood Power Station, a French company who decided to make that decision for a number of reasons. But immediate impact on workers and businesses, particularly in the supply chain to that power station, and to undertake some immediate stimulus investment to look at livability, but to stimulate the economy. And I'm going to go into more detail in this presentation on the support for workers, which is what I've been asked to do. But I wanted to give you a sense of the complexity of the work that we were asked to do, and we work right across these sectors and continue to do that. As we moved out of that early immediate response phase, we moved into the recovery and capability building, and that probably took about the first 18 months to 2 years. And so once we were working with workers and their families to understand where they might transition to, part of our work was to look at where employment growth was occurring and really understand what the market was looking for in terms of employees, understand the actual jobs that were being advertised, understand the skills that were being looked for, and support individual people to move into those job opportunities. At the same time, we needed to stimulate the economy, but we also needed to look where we could expand business growth and then as a consequence of that, job opportunities. So one of the highlights of that work in the initial days was to maximise the local procurement for contracts in the community. So making sure that local businesses got contracts, particularly around construction, making sure local suppliers were providing the supplies for those infrastructure builds, and making sure that local jobs and training was available for workers to be able to take up those job opportunities. So we did a fair bit of work on really understanding. We brought in a procurement specialist, a national specialist, to help us understand where those opportunities were, and work directly with industry and also local government, state government, particularly around any major structure builds that were going on at the time. Thirdly, in addition to that opportunity for job creation, we worked very closely with 150 community organisations on increasing their participation in the change. And that was through anything from small community groups, local halls, local sporting groups, any volunteer group and community-focused networks of people to improve livability, but also increase participation. That also led to job outcomes because we were assisting those communities to rethink their infrastructure, provided funding, that led to new jobs, but it also led to some great outcomes around sustainable practices and use of renewable energy. So we were trying to build into the fabric of our community the understanding of the importance of renewable energy and the shift and change. A very, very successful program with our team of people working on the ground with those community organisations, supporting hand in hand how to undertake that work. The third stage, which we're currently in at the moment, and we're now looking to the next 3 to 5 years, is how we actually build those conditions in a stronger way. And I have to take the opportunity to thank our colleagues in the EU. We're part of the Smart Specialisation platform on the EU, and we looked all over the world for where we could find practices that would support our work, and understanding the innovation and collaboration and shared leadership as the future, and one of the conditions that we are now working on. And we've made some huge gains in that, in building partnerships across industry, particularly in the growth sectors. And this is absolutely about how do we maximise the business opportunity here for competitive advantage beyond coal-fired power station energy production and the use of that resource. So we've not only have that industry has been an important strength, but we also have other sectors that contribute to the economy here, and we're growing those. Alongside that, obviously, is making sure that we have a training and education system that is focused towards the future skills and those growth industries, and we're supporting change in those training organisations and courses. And lastly, the work which is absolutely about maximising the infrastructure and connectivity that we have to increase participation, and livability becomes very important in making sure that people want to stay here and are attracted to live here. So we might move to the next slide. Thank you. So in thinking about support for workers, we established a worker transition service, and I want to just have a talk to you about the elements that led to the final design of this service. Stood up very quickly, said, but really understanding the workers and the people who are affected by the impact of the closure, the first closure. So we were looking towards the new energy sector. We were looking at people who are wanting to retire. We're trying to understand where similar industry and transferable of skills could lead to. Where new industry was beyond the new energy sector, what other jobs were available. We were looking to support people who are wanting to set up their own business and move right out of the power industry and into something completely different. We really needed to understand the casual workforce, because we have a large proportion of casual workers in the industry here. Supply chain businesses I mentioned, and the maintenance contractors. So the workforce is a complex workforce in terms of who provides that service. And then we were looking at some early activities around how we support workers in that service. Now, I'm going to go to a little bit more detail about that on another slide, so I might move to the next slide, please. What was really important about the development of the service for workers was that it was based on a co-design approach. So this is not about someone in an office determining what sort of a service we would provide for workers. Our office is based right in the middle of that location of that map that I showed you, an open door policy, and we use the co-design approach, which is really about understanding the needs of the people who were helping us design the service in the first place. So by partnering with the employees to design their transition means that they had agency over what that should be. It was respectful. It provided very personal opportunity for employees to talk about their own needs, their own uncertainties. And as you can imagine, with a 4-month notice, there was a lot of anxiety, upset and grief and anger at the time, and an opportunity to start to explore, understand the problems, but also the solutions in a collaborative way. What that did was enable a much deeper understanding about how employees were affected and the sorts of things that were needed to assist them to move through the process. It ended up with a very tangible and practical service design, and gave us real insight into the long-term needs and initiatives that we were looking for. So it was a very much an employee-led transition service approach. Next slide, please. So this ended up being the model that we undertook, and you can see the members of this service were not just the Latrobe Valley Authority, but we engaged with employment agencies. We partnered with the trade union movement locally, but it was very much about, you know, registering. It was not compulsory, but we had majority of workers registered for this service. It was certainly about creating a unique plan with the employee and their family about what they needed. And we ended up with a range of services available dependent on the individual needs of the worker or their family member. And it was a continuous support. It was not timed. It was not dedicated to just one session. Workers could come in at any time, and also for as long as they liked. It was also very closely aligned with the job agencies and the Job Active program at the time. And it was a regular check-in by phone as well as in person. So next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the design of this service ended up with a number of service elements based on the needs of workers and their families, and very much around a responsive case management and intake service, but undertook career navigation and employment support. A very strong peer support network was formed. And again, the Trades and Labour Council played a very important role, which we supported through funding, to make sure that we had safe spaces for individuals to go to and to be supported, considering the intense pressure put on people, the emotional strain, and people's fear of losing their job, and they did lose their job. So it's really important that we have strong support for workers to maintain them in our community, but to see a future. So very much around training and skill recognition development, health and wellbeing support, as I just mentioned, but also financial and small business advice, and the collaboration with the partners was very important. So a partnership of 5 organisations, sharing data, making sure that individual people did not have to go to 5 different organisations through one door, and very carefully managed in terms of that support. Next slide, please. So you'll see the list of partners at the bottom of this slide, and some of those, the TAFE Gippsland and Skills Job Centre is our local vocational education centre. Workways is an employment agency, and the Gippsland Employment Skills and Training is an adult education provider. The Gippsland Trade and Labour Council is the union movement here, and made up of a number of unions. And that was really important that we brought those agencies together. As I mentioned earlier on, this is about collaboration and shared leadership and shared commitment. So a very important approach that hadn't happened before. So this was really important to demonstrate the importance of cooperation and collaboration. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to give you a sense of the data to date, 31st of March 2021. And as I've sent to you, the power station closed in March 2017. And there's the numbers of workers and their family members who accessed that service. And we've got some data there on employment at this point of time in March for both contractors and direct employees, and the number of jobs that positions that people have been experiencing over the period of time. I think one of the things that was really important to understand is that 10% of workers looking for work Contractors are a different cohort because they come in and out of work, and they come into 6 months work or less, depending on where they get their work. But the company workers, the ONG workers, we found a number of workers who struggled to make the shift, but we were very pleased with the 78% of workers now in work, and we know that 12% of the workers retired as well. So there are still some workers who haven't been able to find what they've been looking for, but again, some of that is to do with the individual person. So I might move to the next slide, please. Just to give you a sense of the degree of service that was provided. So there's some figures here for you in terms of training and skill recognition. Civil construction was one area where there was a real connection to transferable skills, and a lot of construction happening in Victoria at the time, and many jobs available. So the Trades and Labour Council undertook this training with members of their union, but not just members of their union, other workers, and we funded and worked with the union movement to enable that to happen. As you can see, the degree of support over that period of time has been significant. Over 31,000 sessions of support to workers, their contractors and family members, quite significant in terms of the level of support and the type of support, particularly really around resumes and interviews, supporting people to get jobs. Understand, you know, nearly 5,000 participants involved in getting support for their educational needs. So very, very important, the degree and the significance of this, and the quality associated with that, and the personalised approach that we've taken here. So I might move on to the next slide, please. The other opportunity for workers, as well as the worker transition service, was a worker transfer scheme that was set up particularly with the Victorian government and the Australian tax office to look at ways in which we could support the 3 other companies who were still in mines locally to provide opportunities for the workers coming out of the closed mine to fill retirement vacancies. And so there was some payment to those companies for some early retirements, and then supporting 90 jobs in the end, workers to go into the other coal-fired power stations at the time. That was a successful program, but as the mines close, that's going to be less suitable as the numbers reduce. So again, in addition to the worker transition service, the worker transfer scheme was successful for the time that it was offered. Is now closed, and we're now looking at the possibility of maybe having this program for the next slated closure, which is in 2028. So next slide, thank you. Lastly, I just wanted to talk about those conditions that I've mentioned. We're now talking transition into transformation of our community. And so our heavy work now is on making sure that we support advocacy across our community, and we get the value realised out of the work in reality, and the changes that occur and that we need to occur. Innovation, really important. We haven't been a strongly innovative community, so that's become very important in terms of establishing that. Shifts in organisational structures and policy, and I know I heard from our German colleagues the importance of policy and regulation. So we're working on getting some of that changed, and we are having an impact on that. and certainly about the way resources and assets flow and making sure that investment goes where it needs to go. Really important, we've been mapping changes in practice and behaviour and system change, and that's we can demonstrate very clearly that that is occurring, and the idea of system work and strong relationships and making sure that we have an integrated approach to the work that we do. We've got many frameworks that we've developed on the back of this one slide, and I don't have time this afternoon to be talking to you about that, but it's quite a comprehensive framework that we've been working with. So I might finish there, and thank you very much for being able to be here this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Karen. It's very enlightening and very full of insights that's been shared with all of us this afternoon, and we appreciate the success story of the transition process, especially in the closure of power plants and coal mines. I'd like to proceed here. Before we go into question and answer sessions, I'd like to provide a few summary, if I may, and then it will be followed by one of my colleagues, Mohtar Kartawan, who will also be saying a few things about the connection, the context, what has already been presented to Indonesia's situation. So we have more time for also a question and answer. Either you can write it down at a Q&A platform, or you can actually raise hands. Anybody who would like to ask directly to the panelists, we could do so as well. So perhaps it's good to say a few things from what's already been presented. Philip started by saying in the case of energy transition, especially with the case of coal phase out, there are similarities and differences, okay? And it is even among the developed countries, such as exemplified this afternoon between Germany and Australia, we already see that highlighting the similarity and also the differences. One thing which I like to underline when Philip mentioned that the socio-economic benefits is probably clear to everybody, right? That in the future we would be better off doing this. Otherwise, we all would regret it that we didn't the things that we needed to do. But then, as in life, we always face trade-offs, and the trade-offs is the cost, especially the short-term cost in terms of addressing this transition to which the phase down, the closure, or the early retirement, and so on and so forth, will have to be quote unquote incentivized. That actually going to cost, and so we'll pay for it, right? And who's going to do that? I mean, Philip mentioned about the financing and about affordability, which is actually going to be faced by all the countries, and including Indonesia. And it's the challenges that the government has in terms of making sure we are going to also move forward, especially we don't want to get trapped in the middle income situation. We would also like to move up to the ladder of developed countries in the future. That actually requiring a bit of more energy going to be consumed. Of course, we would probably like to have it supplied through the energy, clean and renewable energy that is not going to emit carbon dioxide emission. So understand that some of the similarities being presented to us is the role of how do you say it, the inclusiveness of the decision making, especially in the case of Germany. It is among the political factions that addressing these, just saying that this is our common challenges, so we have to put together despite differences of political incline. So in the case of Australia, in the particular places like Latrobe you see the way it was managed in involving the people, the community, and everything that actually been quite successfully done, right? So I would like to turn my the time to Pak Kartawan, who Pak Kartawan is a mechanical engineer who's been working in PLN for many years, and his last position was one of the directors at the PLN subsidiary, Indonesia Power, whose responsibility was to provide the generation capacity to be distributed by PLN to the customers. So, Pak Kartawan, I would like to ask you to say a few words to put this thing, the previous presentation in context, especially in an Indonesia situation, especially addressing also the differences that we have. Everything in our case is PLN, whether it's on the upstream side, in the generation side, transmission, distribution, and also all the way to the customer. It is all still being bundled together, and the country is still facing a lot of challenges, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's meeting the future demand, and in dealing with the fossil fuel, and also in fighting investment, requiring a lot of investment in renewable energy. Over to you, Pak Kartawan.
Oke, terima kasih Pak Widiawan. Thank you very much, Pak Widiawan. Ladies and gentlemen, especially from Germany and Australia, Kirsten, Jan, Lisa, and Philip, and Karen. I think your presentations today is very beautiful and acceptable to us. I would like to not to counter the presentation, but please allow me to tell the story of coal in Indonesia, the coal utilization for electricity. So starting from 1985, PLN, or government of Indonesia, built a big, at the time, 4x400 megawatt units in Suralaya using coal from Bukit Asam, South Sumatra. At that time, there were two options: to transport the coal from Bukit Asam to Suralaya, Suralaya is in Java, or to transmit the electricity. So at the time, the government decided to transport the coal from Bukit Asam, South Sumatra, to Suralaya, West Java. Why? You know, in reality, in Indonesia is consists of thousands of islands. Yeah. And unfortunately, Java Island is a smaller island, yeah, between the bigger one. This is smaller than Sumatra, Kalimantan, Sulawesi, and also Papua. But in Java Island lives about 150 million people. And with regard to the electricity load, today the load of Java, electricity load in Java, is about more than 60% of the load of Indonesia. Unfortunately, the primary energy resources not available anymore in Java, including the coal. You can see that the coal mining is many available in Kalimantan, but the biggest coal power plant in quantity and capacity is in Java. In Kalimantan, no big coal power plant, maybe only 100 megawatt units, and also in Sumatra. So why? Because the industrial load all in Java. And the other reality is, if we shift to the renewable energy resources in Indonesia, majority are available in Sumatra, in Kalimantan, Sulawesi, and Papua. For example, for geothermal, about 75 gigawatt potential is available outside Java. In Java Island, geothermal finished. We cannot build anymore. In hydropower plant, hydropower potential also majority available outside Java. And even solar energy, the radiation of sun, the maximum radiation of sun in Indonesia are not in Java, but in East Nusa Tenggara, like Timor, etc. Maybe only in Madura or in Bali or in part of East Java. Wind is not available in Java, very small. Now we have two big wind park in Sulawesi, 75 megawatt each. So the problem is, if we shift the electricity from coal to renewable, we have to think double rather than in maybe in Germany or in Australia. I think maybe you can assist us to give some advice. One option is to build the renewable power plant like geothermal, hydropower plant, big geothermal, big hydropower plant outside Java, but the electricity shall be transmitted to Java. Or you have to relocate all industry from Java to outside Java. That our government has to think about that. While for, I think, since I used to be to work in PLN in 1970s, there is a plan from PLN to finish the utilization of oil at the time, because at the time there is no coal power plant. There was no coal power plant in the 70s. Starting in 1985, just Suralaya already finished built. Because at that time, the electrification ratio is only about 60%, while now about almost 100% electrification ratio. And the electrical energy consumption per capita at that time only 500 kilowatt hour per capita per year, while now maybe only 1,500 kilowatt hour per capita per year. And the demand growth at that time about 15 to 20% a year, while now only 5%, 5 to 6% a year. So maybe different condition with Germany or Australia, because the electricity demand growth is saturated now, but in Indonesia still growing up. The problem is the load center, the maximum load are in Java, while the primary energy, especially renewable energy resources, are outside Java. Yeah, that's the reality. Of course, it is not an excuse, but we have to think more about this, because if we build, for example, from 50 hertz may assist us to build a transmission line, including submarine cable, and we have bad experience with submarine cable between Java Island to Bali. There are about, if I'm not mistaken, about 12 circuits, submarine cable, 150 kV, but only 2 still remain. The other break by the wave. Yeah.
All right.
That's no problem. Yeah, that's all of my comments. And I think we hope that from Germany and Australia can assist us to, of course, we understand that renewable energy, transition energy is a must. Yeah. We have to follow this. Thank you, Pak Widiawan.
Thank you, Pak Kartawan. I'd like to welcome any of the participants who would like to ask the questions directly. Please kindly raise your hand so that I can identify you. And also, if there are any questions on the YouTube version, I'd like to ask the organizers to please forward it to me so I can address them. When I noticed the questions that being posted the Q&A panel, I see there are 2 different ways of thinking, if I may say so, especially this is to Jan Christoph and also to Kirsten. In your case, in Germany, the notion of base load is no longer fixed to have something like coal, nuclear, or Mohtar mentioned about geothermal and so on, but even the variable renewable energy could provide the base load. Perhaps Jan Christoph and Kristen, would you be able to elaborate this even more, addressing or summarizing also the questions that you've been answered? Please, maybe I like to have Kirsten do first before Jan Christoph. Go ahead.
Thanks, Rowan. I already tried to answer this by my written comments, because our TSO experience is that renewable energy sources are actually delivering base load nowadays, and only we need gas-fired power plants today. And as you all know, we already we still use coal-fired power plants and lignite-fired power plants today in specific times when we don't have enough interconnectivity, so enough import from our European neighbor countries, and because we don't have enough flexibility installed in the German system. So for the future, we expect an increase in flexibility options. We think that this will be the case also due to digitalization. And we are also investing in that. And I know from all TSOs, from all DSOs, from all players in Germany that they're heavily investing in flexibility, digitalized options. And we definitely have to see some growth in interconnectivity, that's for sure. But the base load needs that we have seen, let's say 20 years ago, we've seen covered by, or we will see covered by renewable energies in combination with interconnectivity and flexibilization. And only for the, I mentioned it in my presentation, only for the Dunkelflaute, for these couple of hours during a specific week during the year, normally in January in Germany, where we don't have PV, we don't have wind, and we don't have enough imports because France and Poland are short too, then we would need the backup capacity. So nowadays it will be gas-fired power plants, maybe later on then hydrogen-fired power plants, but that's in our scenarios the only case where we need fossil-fired power plants anymore for the next years. Thank you.
Thank you. Jan Christoph, please add.
I mean, thanks again. I think there is not much to add to what Kerstin said, but maybe to explain it and to make it illustrative. I mean, you have to consider, first of all, I don't think that we have a baseload problem. We have problems with the transition to renewables, but we don't have a baseload problem. And the renewables will come in as baseload. What does that mean? That doesn't mean that we have, as with lignite or nuclear, one installation that runs through. But it means, of course, that we have a significant amount of renewables in the system. There will always be an area where it's wind or where the sun is shining. So you have to look at it from the point of scale. If you have only one windmill, to put it to the extreme, and there's no wind, then you of course have a problem. But if you have windmills and solar across Germany, and what is more, across Europe, then you of course have effects that you always have a band of renewables that is running through. And only in very rare occasions, especially when you look at from a European perspective, and only very rare occasions you come to a situation where this band of baseload renewables is really breaks down. So the actual challenge is not the baseload. The challenge is what is going on top of the baseload. And this is where comes in the flexibility and all this. So there you need the system switch, because the system that we see today is not fully ready to deal with this flexibility requirement.
Thank you so much, Jan Christoph. Philip, do you want to add a few things to what already been said?
No, actually, I feel that this was already quite extensive and sufficient, so nothing further to add from my side.
Okay, Philip, in that case, would you actually put something when you're actually already doing the comparison at the beginning, and after listening to the presentations of both from the German and Australian side, are you still keeping with what you already said, or is there anything that you would like to add as far as making the comparison is concerned?
Well, maybe just to underline again my initial point, I think what we need to be very clear about is that the transformation will look very, very different in every country. And what we also need to be aware of is that there are no tailor-made solutions. I think what became very clear in the presentation from Karen is that you see that it really depends on a specific case, on a specific region, on a specific country, actually on the specific worker, what help they would need. In some cases, this is a broader financial scheme. In some cases, this is really just support on the ground for workers and their family. And also what I've heard quite a few times is the term innovation today. And for me, it's always a bit difficult to really get a sense of what innovation means. But for me, it really means that in the end, we need to be creative about solutions. And also talking about the flexibility, what we just heard, it's quite clear that we can move forward the way that we did over the last couple of years. There's no really an alternative of phasing down coal in the power sector, which comes with huge challenges and huge challenges to the individual workers, to the individual communities, to the respective governance. And with that regards, I feel that we need to get creative in terms of ideas, what we can do about it. And we've heard today a few examples on how to overcome these challenges. Kerstin also showed us quite clearly how difficult it is actually for a system operator to implement this change, to base a power sector on renewable energy, on variable wind and solar. It's nothing that falls that can just be implemented overnight. But nonetheless, for all the challenges that we're seeing, there are options that we can use to address those challenges. And with that regards, this is kind of a positive message I take from that. Despite all the huge challenges we have, there are ideas and innovation challenges and solutions in place that we can use to address those. And this is kind of the common approach that I feel is needed to tackle those challenges.
All right. I think I'd like to also give the opportunity for Karen to say a few words. I'm not sure if you had the chance to look through the question that's been posted, but I think from the discussion that we just had among the speakers, would you like to add a few words, Karen?
Yes, thank you. I think the point about context specific is very important, and I'm talking context specific, country differences, regional differences, cultural differences, economic differences is really important. And so even within Australia, the Latrobe Valley is not the same as communities in Queensland or Western Australia in terms of fired power station communities. Every circumstance is different, but there are commonalities, and the commonalities I'm hearing is how we transition from coal-generated power to renewables, and that's facing everybody. And the contexts are different, and the challenges are different. The opportunities are different, but I think what's really important here is how do we move our communities to that? How do we move our businesses to that? I think the business community here in Australia is well and truly down the road, and probably well ahead of our federal government at the moment here on that. And with Glasgow coming up very soon, there's a lot of debate in this country about it at the moment. But investors and certainly big businesses here are right on the renewable energy platform. The point that the difficulty for us is how we move our communities who have been dependent on this for many years, and they're not in our big cities. So I think the discussion about, happening in Java and outside of Java is really relevant here. These are rural, and in some cases, quite isolated communities. So it's going to be different, required in different places. But I think there's some common things here, which is about what are the conditions that you need to enable these communities to look to the future around what are the strengths they have and how they make the most out of the opportunities in the location. So whether it's getting into renewable energy, and particularly in Queensland, there's been some big announcements at the moment made by, some very, very big companies about green hydrogen. There's an opportunity in Queensland. There's an opportunity for those communities. So I think it's understanding where those opportunities are, but most importantly, being really clear about the evidence about where they are, and how do we attract investment is the bit of work we're doing at the moment.
Very good point. Thank you. We do have some other questions. I would like to invite Pak Supriyadi Legino. Can somebody unmute him so that he can ask the question directly? His questions about carbon tax and emission trading scheme. Please go ahead, Pak Supriyadi. Pak Supriyadi was the director of PLN in the past, and he was also the president of the PLN University also in the past. Pak Supriyadi, over to you if you would like to address the questions directly. Somebody can please unmute him. Okay, let me just read his questions, okay? Based on Germany experience, which is more effective between carbon tax and carbon trading to push renewable energy development? Anybody from the German side would like to address this question? That's Pak Supriyadi. Pak Supriyadi, please go ahead if you would like to.
Okay, thank you Pak Wan for reading my question. So actually, which one is more effective? So as we know that the Indonesian government will apply soon about the carbon tax, but it is like a cost, yeah. But the carbon trading, it maybe the transaction, it will be more accountable according to my opinion. But based on Germany's experience, so which one is more effective, yeah, to motivate parties to develop renewable energy?
Pak Supriyadi, you also have another question. You may want to just put it
all together.
Yeah,
actually, so I want to comment for the answer by Jan that he said that in Germany the government does not pay too much attention for the biomass. Yeah, so why? Because in my opinion, the only renewable energy that can be renewed by human effort is only biomass, not sun, not wind. Biomass can be planted, it can be harvested, but why German government? Maybe I'm wrong. Please explain either Jan or Kristen.
Or Philip.
Oh, Philip, sorry.
Exactly, or Philip. So maybe one of you are starting only from my perspective, because we are not, I mean, we are dealing with political decisions as a TSO. From my personal opinion, for the next 10 years, we actually should review all of the decisions we have made so far. So far, biomass, the use of biomass and the production of biomass is in a way uneconomical, so it's not really it's not worth it, if you want to say so. So Jan Christoph can elaborate on that even better than me, even I can. But actually, my personal opinion, we should review everything, because at the end of the day we will need everything to reach the goals. But only my 5 cents. Thank you.
Philip or Jan?
Yeah, I would like. Yeah, Jan, please.
Jan, you were still on mute.
Should I start? Philip, you can, I don't mind.
Okay, so I take a shot on the question of CO2 pricing. In my understanding, the German experience is that which kind of CO2 pricing we use to incentivize renewable energy growth is only a less priority question. Much more important is actually the question is how do you ensure for the investors into renewable energy that they have a sufficiently stable income stream so that they are confident enough to build those renewable plants, which at today's level might not really not fully finance themselves through the power market. And the way that the German government did this was first with a so-called feed-in tariff system, where all the power plants get a fixed feed-in tariff, like an additional subsidy which is paid by the consumer, which in the very beginning was quite expensive, was also quite successful. And then step by step, this system was more liberalized and more transformed into a market-based system. So today, most of the bigger plants are financed in that way, that they get some money or some revenue through the power market, and additionally some top up through some top up which is defined through an auctioning system, which they get additionally to secure their income. Now, how much CO2 price is already included in the whole power market scheme? It doesn't really make a difference if it's defined through a tax in general or through an ETS, at least not theoretical, but practically my understanding would be that a CO2 tax would be much more predictable and therefore much more reliable to calculate for renewable energy power plant operator than an ETS, where you have much more flexible CO2 pricing if it doesn't have a minimum CO2 price angle in there. But these are my 2 cents on that.
Jan Christoph?
Yeah, just to add a little to what has already been said. First of all, CO2 prices. I absolutely share Philip's view. It is very difficult to make renewables come true only with CO2 prices. This is what I would say. Because you need stability for investors, and it is very difficult as the surroundings for an investment does not only depend on the CO2 price, but also other aspects. It's very difficult to create an environment in which you will really see investments in renewables only with a CO2 price. It's not impossible, but I think it's challenging, and it's not what we do in Germany. We do it the other way around, as Philip just pointed out. And also, I share the view that it's not the most important question if you go for an ETS or a CO2 tax. This depends a bit on the sector. We have both. We have a trading scheme in the power sector with the power plants, and we have a CO2 tax with regard, for example, to the heating sector. So it depends also a bit on the sector, but this is not the most crucial question in my view. And then a brief comment also on the biomass issue. The answer, in very short, is that it's not economic, at least not in Germany. It's the most expensive renewable energy source, and it's easy to explain. Because compared to wind and solar, where you don't need a fuel, the fuel is for free. You only need the investment. But once it is running, you have no further costs. You need with biomass, you need the investment in the first place, and you need the fuel for the entire lifespan of the installation. That brings me to one other point, because the aspects of costs was already mentioned a couple of times. I want to just highlight one interesting development in Germany. It is actually the German industry, and you must know that the German industry is a very, very strong political player in Germany because it is a very important economic sector. The German industry is pushing for more renewables. They are pushing for more wind, onshore, offshore, and solar. And for one very, very simple reason. It's not because they are also maybe environmentally friendly, but it's not because they're environmentally friendly, but because they realize that, at least with regard to spot market prices, the renewables are by far the cheapest energy source that you can have. And this is also why we, at least in Germany, and I also personally, have strong doubts that these considerations regarding, for example, nuclears, which you can see in many countries, Poland, UK, France, traditionally also, they will really struggle, I suppose, because of the costs. I think you have to take this into consideration. I think the future will be probably wind and solar mostly.
Thank you, Jens, and thank you, Pak Supriyadi, for the questions. Earlier, Ibu Lisa, thinks that actually mentioned about RUPTL. This is the long-term planning, the 10-year planning of PLN, in which in that document it was mentioned, and then that's probably why the question coming from Pak Supriyadi, because the current planning of PLN and then actually doing it is just to use biomass in their coal power plant. And I'm not sure whether that would be the route that's going to be taken, that could be a sustainable means. I'm not sure if also anybody would like to take their comments on this particular initiatives that's being done by PLN, including people from PLN like Pak Supriyadi and Pak Mohtar Kartawan. Would this be what they call it, the co-firing initiative, will work as far as the PLN efforts to increase the renewable energy capacity? Pak Kartawan and Pak Supriyadi?
Well, I think Pak Supriyadi is the founder of biomass from waste, yeah, Pak Supriyadi. So the biomass that introduced by Pak Supriyadi is not using wood chip, etc., but using the waste. Yeah, Pak Supriyadi.
Yeah. So any kind of waste, including plantation waste, including like the wild bush, wild plantation, or hyacinth, water hyacinth, we call this eceng gondok. Any kind that chlorophyll inside can be used as biomass, of course, with the kind of bio drying process. So here, regarding the price, it can be cheaper because one policy can make two solutions: solving the waste problem, which is also costly, and also adding the energy for as a fuel for the power plant. So maybe it will be different. And for the continuity of supply, so we can plan because it is not the kind of like a wood. So like the wild grass, wild bush, everything that can be grown in 1 week or 2 weeks can be used as the source of the energy. That is what our finding during my research in my academy. Yeah, before I was a chancellor for 8 years in the company, and I do the research, and that is we can reach more than 3,000 kilocal per kilogram, yeah, from any kind of waste. So then there is an opportunity. Then, as I can say, this is the only renewable that can be renewed by human effort, not sun, not wind. That's different. But biomass can be renewed, can be planted, can be harvested.
Well, but the point that Jan Christoph mentioned is about the economics, right? So I think once the economic is there, and then once actually you compete with the price of zero fuel, and then in the case that you have to have the supply chain and everything. Although I regard that in a few countries in Europe, there is also power plants that actually use waste as their fuel, right, Jan Christoph?
Yes, indeed, and maybe let me elaborate a bit on this issue. I think what to avoid also misunderstandings, what I initially said with regard to solar and wind is when it comes to the question, what is actually in a future system your base load energy supply? So the most important energy source that you have, and I think there, if you look at the system overall, it will have, most probably it will have to be a solar and wind because it is just the cheapest. But it is also true what, for example, Kerstin said earlier, here in Germany, we're in a situation that we will need all sources from energy. And the different sources will play different roles. So indeed, we also have operators, and I put this forward in a chat earlier today. We have operators in Germany that consider to switch coal-fired power plants to biomass-fired power plants. And we are very curious, to be honest, we are very curious to see if this works without state funding, so market-based. It seems like it might be, but it's not sure yet. Let me put it this way. If this works market-based, this is fine, and this can be a good addition to have a good portfolio of different energy sources. But it will not play the role that wind and solar will have to play. But then you can, if it cannot come into existence market-based, then you come to the question: do you want to put in state funding in such projects? And this is, I think, a entire separate discussion, because at least in Germany we would have to import the biomass, and then you come to a question: is this biomass really renewable? And what is the concurrence of the biomass that you import with other, for example, with food production, which are very, very tricky questions, at least for us to answer in Germany, because you would need certification systems and so forth. So this is a question. Again, the point is, I think for Germany, the cash cow, if you want to, is not going to be biomass. But biomass might play a role, and it does. Other countries, you're correct, the Netherlands, for example, other countries are looking at this, and I think the UK has a plant operating already. But they need for the big plants that they have operation, and they need also huge amounts of biomass, right?
Okay, thank you so much, Supriyadi and Jan Christoph. We are towards the end of our event, our sessions. I noticed there's communications which is very interesting between the questions coming from Pa Indriantono, and it was answered already by Pak Rahmat Mardiana. So, if Pak Rahmat kalau tidak keberatan, apakah bersedia untuk menyampaikan apa yang didiskusikan juga untuk kepentingan dari para pembicara yang sudah ada di sini, sekaligus untuk share. Menurut saya jawaban dari Pak Rahmat itu mencerminkan beberapa kondisi yang kita hadapi di Indonesia terkait dari peran pemerintah, juga dari sisi BUMN, khususnya PLN tentunya, dan juga dari sektor swasta. Pak Rahmat, apakah bersedia untuk menyampaikan jawabannya untuk semua peserta? Pak Rahmat, kami persilakan.
Baik, Pak. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Mudah-mudahan sehat semua. Tadi terima kasih atas pertanyaannya yang telah disampaikan, dan memang untuk suatu hal yang besar, khususnya terkait dengan transisi energi yang tentunya juga bukan hanya merupakan kewajiban pemerintah untuk bisa menyelesaikannya, tentunya juga kolaborasi antara pemerintah, kemudian juga praktisi dan akademisi, utamanya dari sisi inovasi, kemudian juga penemuan teknologi baru yang pada intinya memang diperlukan supaya khususnya untuk yang energi, khususnya lagi tenaga listrik ini bisa tersedia, handal, dan tentunya juga perkembangan teknologi tadi juga harus memberikan harga yang murah pada Ibu ya. Dan tentunya juga untuk yang badan usaha ini juga mengingat untuk yang investasi di transisi energi akan memerlukan biaya yang cukup banyak, dan kemampuan pemerintah sendiri sebagai regulator, kemudian juga mungkin dalam hal-hal tertentu bisa juga fasilitator dari sisi pendanaan, itu juga tidak bisa membiayai keseluruhan dari transisi energi di sini. Dan tentunya juga dengan adanya bagi masyarakat juga ini penting, mengingat peran daripada masyarakat juga sebagai pemangku kepentingan utama, yang tentunya juga nantinya akan sangat terkait dengan kebijakan-kebijakan dari transisi energi, yang mungkin di satu sisi bisa juga terkait dengan adanya harga yang kalau misalnya untuk prosesnya itu memerlukan biaya yang lebih mahal, dan tentunya juga pemahaman masyarakat utamanya terkait dengan upaya-upaya dengan transisi energi yang menginginkan agar bumi ini lebih bisa berkelanjutan nantinya dari sisi kehidupan, itu juga jadi hal-hal yang perlu dikolaborasikan secara bersama-sama. Dan memang tentunya dari sisi pemerintah tadi juga mungkin Masnya menanyakan terkait dengan leadership di salah satu kementerian ataupun lembaga, namun kalau misalnya boleh bilang ini memang pekerjaan pemerintah secara keseluruhan, tentunya leadership dari pemimpin, utamanya dari sisi presiden itu yang sangat-sangat berpengaruh di dalam implementasi dari transisi energi ini. Mungkin itu Pak Wawan yang ingin coba kami sampaikan. Ini memang pekerjaan yang berat kalau misalnya dari sisi tadi beberapa narasumber menyampaikan terkait dengan target-target yang akan dilakukan oleh baik itu di Jerman, kemudian juga di Australia. Tentunya juga kita bisa mengambil pelajaran dari pengalaman-pengalaman tersebut, dan tentunya itu merupakan bahan ataupun bekal yang sangat berharga di dalam kita menentukan strategi transisi energi versi Indonesia sendiri, dan tentunya juga negara-negara itu juga kondisinya berbeda-beda, khususnya untuk Indonesia yang sifatnya dari sisi geografis juga memiliki kompleksitas tersendiri. Mungkin itu yang bisa disampaikan Pak Wawan.
Baik, terima kasih Pak Rahmat sudah meringankan tugas saya sebagai moderator. Terima kasih sekali lagi sudah mengajak saya juga untuk berpartisipasi. Lisa, thank you for having me in this program, and my highest appreciations to all speakers. You guys have been great, and it was really a very what you call it. I wish we had more time, but unfortunately, I think it's enough for today. I will continue and will be asking perhaps Case to keep doing this so that we keep being enlightened by this kind of event. So I'm very mindful that the time is already up. So with that, I would like to give back the session to Ibu Lisa Timshut.
Thank you so much, Pak Wawan, and all panelists. I was listening attentively, and I do agree with you. It was very insightful. It's a shame we have to stop now. I think we're now getting at the interesting part. So I fully agree with you that we will have to continue. I think especially now that we were starting to look into what does it mean for Indonesia? And I think some things that were mentioned here really struck with me. I think Philip was really pointing out that there's of course no solution that can be copy-paste from one country to the other. So the idea here is really to learn and see how other countries have been doing it. I think there's a lot of inspiration we can take, but of course Indonesia is quite specific, quite special, right? Alone, if you look at the map with the more than 600 grids, I think that we have, so it's a completely different interconnection challenge compared to Germany, obviously. But yeah, I think what we've achieved in this discussion is to see the variety of the challenges we need to look at. So from financial economic aspects, I think Indonesia always, the questions is of course, okay, how can this be financed? How can it remain affordable on consumers? How can it be technically done? So I think we started to look into this and see what we can learn, but we need to continue. I will not even try to summarize all the important points that have been made, but I agree that the right way forward, and I think that was also mentioned by Karen, just to hear, to listen, to involve everyone. I think this is the spirit of Case, that we have these discussions where everyone can bring in the various ideas, where we can discuss hot topics and ask questions about biomass profiling or the role of green hydrogen and so on. And we will continue to do so. And the next opportunity for this is already on Friday, where we will take this to another level. We will have various Indonesian speakers with us, where we will discuss on their individual perspectives on the role of coal in the future. So we will also invite someone from coal associations from the regions, but also from younger generations, of course, from government, to discuss together what are the different perspectives, and hopefully we can, work out a few more things on how Case could support and to get an aligned understanding how to move forward. But of course, we won't be able to answer what will be the ideal scenario for Indonesia in this event either. With that, I think I will not add any further comments, but again, thank all the speakers. Also, thank you, Pak Wawan, for the very good moderation, and also Mas Ganda, thank you for your support, and of course, everyone who contributed from the GIZ team, particularly Vega, to make this happen. With that, I don't know if there's any further closing remarks from anyone. I'll hand back to you, Wawan, first.
I think there is a video to be put up by the organizer. I think that's all from me as well. Thank you, everyone. Have always a safe journey wherever you're going to go. And I think thanks again for being here today with us. Go ahead, Bahasa Global. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Ya,
Terima kasih
Thank you,
Pak
everyone.
Rahmat, sampai jumpa lagi.
ya siap Pak Dialog.
Pak Wid,
Pak
Pak Wawan.
Siap.
Ya, ini sama belakang-belakangnya ada Wan semua nih kayaknya. Ya. Salam kenal Pak, nanti kita ketemu lagi
Thank
nanti.
you, Yan.
Ya, baik Pak, baik.
Thank you,
Pak Wawan,
Kerstin.
terima kasih. Lisa.
Thank you Lisa, Kerstin.
Christine. Latur. Yang
Mohon pamit Pak.
Ya.